Hello.
Something not correct on this. Are you able to hear me? Can somebody tell me, confirm?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'll start presenting. Let's see if there is something wrong. I'll have to reconnect perhaps.
Yes, sure, sir.
Okay. Please let me know once my screen is up.
Yes, sir. We can see the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, you can minimize that.
Right. I will not put the video on. It's okay, right?
Yeah, sure. No issues, sir.
Okay. So, good afternoon, all. Welcome and join me on this session on effect of building motion on non-structural elements. So today it's in a way slightly non-technical because it is basically non-structural for as far as we are concerned. So let's hope that it's not something that you find very heavy and technical, but something more of a common sense. And it is really a common sense. Actually, if you look at in that sense, entire structural design is nothing but common sense. Of course, but you have to apply some scientific principles and do some mathematical number crunching. But it's primarily a common sense. So obviously there are main categories of non-structural elements, and most important will be services. And the thing is that nowadays the focus, because of the high investment, the time, kind of infrastructure that we put up in buildings, it is not just sufficient to save human life during earthquake event, but it is also to ensure that building is operational as early as possible post earthquake event. And that is sort of an entire focus today, on the study on effect of earthquake and wind and those things on non-structural elements. So one of the primary services, especially in a high rise, it will be electrical, because nothing will function if electricity is not working. So you need to ensure that your generators, your transformers, your electrical panel rooms, generally panels tend to be very tall. Sometimes they are as tall as 3.5 meters, or as simple as an electrical riser room where your risers are routed. Those need to be very well structured in a way. I mean, you have to design them, you have to support them adequately. If particular equipment requires isolation at the base, then it needs to be done properly. It needs to be maintained properly, and those are the things that matter to you, right? Uh, then second most in a way will be the firefighting, or maybe first. It's depending on, because in case of earthquake, sometimes there may be other casualties like some short circuit, something else happening, something catching fire due to something, and that will lead to a second catastrophe successively after an earthquake, and that is where you need your firefighting systems to be perfectly working condition. So your sprinklers, your pumps, all those things, the pipes that carry the water to the sprinkler location, they need to be put in position. They should not come down during an earthquake. So all of these things are important. Then of course the mechanical equipment. Now this typically your AC and everything, those will be shut off in the event of earthquake. So that is not an issue. Your AC may not work, but when you want to occupy it again, maybe a week after or 10 days after the earthquake event, then you should not be required to reinstitute all these systems from the word go. They should be more or less in a working condition with minor some repairs here and there, and they should be functional. That is the idea. So chillers, air cooled chillers, water cooled chillers, whichever they are, cooling towers, then your pumps that circulate the water if it's a water system, water cooled system, all of those things. So they all need their own protection in terms of what happens during an earthquake. Now protection does not mean that they need to be physically protected, but for example, if they are to be mounted on a platform, like you can see here on the right hand side bottom picture, that platform should be sturdy enough to withstand not just the load but also earthquake, right? So it is not just sufficient to have a structure which supports the load, but it should be taking care of the earthquake event, if it happens. Then third thing will be transportation. Lifts will be the most important factor post earthquake. So again, during earthquake, lifts may be automatically shut down. They should not be working anyway, because under vibrating conditions, the lift will not work properly. But it has been found many a times, the guide rails, they come out during earthquake because they are not considered a very strong structural necessity. So they are generally provided properly, but not perhaps adequately supported, or not perhaps adequately supported in lateral direction. Or your motor, which is in the lift machine room, or even if it's a machine roomless lift, that support, it has to be sturdy enough to keep the motor working. And last but not the least is the plumbing. Now, plumbing primarily, if all the other systems are working, plumbing system should work unless the pipes themselves break out. So you need to worry about those things. But in terms of system, I don't think there is much more other than the other systems. Now, if you look at other important elements, so of course there'll be external walls. Now, when I'm saying walls, I'm not just looking at brick walls. I mean, brick walls, yes, they are important. For us as structural engineers, they are more or less non-structural because we don't calculate their capacity to carry load for as far as the vertical load is concerned. But if they are present in the column beam frame structure, they act as a sort of a truss. They create the truss action between the column beam frame. In a way, they act like their own shear wall system. So just the brick wall in the column beam frame makes it stiffer than a pure column beam frame. As a result, they need to be adequately designed for that. Other important factor is, even if they may not be load bearing in any sense, it should not happen that they fall, and because they fall, they cause some damage to property or to humans, right? So that's an important factor. Other than brick walls, nowadays people use various kinds of external cladding systems. You will have a stone cladded system, you will have a glazing, you could have something like a aluminum, alucobond kind of your metallic boards. You have simple jalis made of sometimes even GRC, grass reinforced concrete. Lots of materials available, and they are widely used, and architects are fond of using different materials for different purposes. The main thing is they should be secured properly, with the structural system. So because ultimately they are supported on somewhere the main structural frame, either through beams, either through their own structural skeleton in the structural steel, or like external, facade of glass, you have aluminum, muniums and tanzums and all of those. So those should be properly secured, properly connected, and again, they should not fall out as during earthquake, which will cause any damage. So they themselves may not be, even if they are damaged, there may not be many apart from cost repercussions of replacement, there may not be any specific problem, from the functioning point of view. But if they fall, they might cause a damage, and that's something that is very serious, and that should be taken care of. Other, of course, are internal walls, partitions, so all various kinds of walls. You have lightweight, you have glass, you have boards, different things. You could have lightweight blocks, you could have Ciporex blocks. All those, they, as far as possible, they should be standing even after earthquake with minor damage. Because again, if they fall, they may cause an injury, or they may block the path to a fire escape staircase, wherein people may go out. So if people want to go out through a staircase and the path is blocked because something has fallen over there, then that staircase is of no use for escape, right? So in short, all these additional things, whatever they are, whether they are interiors, they are loose furnitures, false ceiling is a very, very critical element in terms of not functionality, but if it falls, it may fall on somebody's head tomorrow. And then what happens? There could be injury. Other thing, as I mentioned, is if they come and block the passage, taking you out of the office, then what do you do? So that's why all these things are important. But primary focus in these external things is external walls and external cladding. So now let's look at some of the types of failures, wherein they fail. What kind of non-structural elements and fail, and in what manner. So these are typical examples, not the only examples. But if you look at the pumps and boilers, those kind of equipment, I have some noise. Can somebody check if they are all muted? Okay. So pumps and boilers, they typically, they fail at the support where they are anchored. That is a common cause. Same with tanks, or you might have some tanks, just water tank perhaps, or some other tanks like storage tanks for water purpose, they fail. Motor generators. So generators is secondary backup system, right? For specifically electrical. They will fail at support. Your parapets, they topple during earthquake motions. They don't remain vertical. So yeah, you finally topple. As I mentioned, cladding, stone cladding or concrete, that will fall out. If there is a separation created, or if the structural system fails locally. Elevators, as I mentioned, crucial. Guide rails are often found broken, or counterweights, they slip. They are misaligned, so they cannot function immediately. Then a lot of office spaces will have battery banks, USB, all those things over there. So those things, because they are power sources, again, they are very important for the functioning of the organization. But again, if they are only stored and not structurally supported, then they might cause a problem because they will come out. We'll see some of the examples in the photos. And as I mentioned, false ceiling becomes an important part, and typically it falls directly below because of the loss of anchorage of the anchor fasteners, or because of lateral stability. We'll see what it means. So typical examples of cracks or wall failures during earthquake. Now these are not Indian photographs; they are from South America. South America, Mexico, Chile, those regions you will be aware are prone to high earthquakes. So the leftmost image, you can see the wall as separated practically, from the other walls, and it is sort of trying to come out. Or the second figure on the left, from the left, you can see a diagonal crack, in the window. Now this is what I was talking about, the brick wall acting like a shear wall. Because of its mass and its continuity, it will attract force, whether we like it or not. And if it is not sufficiently strong enough, it will crack and fall. Similar observation you can see on the second figure from the right, where in next to windows you can see a lot of cracks, and that causes the rest of the wall become destabilized. And another example of diagonal cracks on the far extreme right, where you have two diagonal cracks on both sides of the opening, between opening. So you have two openings, and in between them there is not sufficient portion of wall to take care of the transfer of forces, so it collapses over there, it gives you over there. Another example of out of plane. So you can see the top roof was not adequately supported, and during earthquake it actually pushed the portion of wall out, and actually it fell down completely. Right, so that's a common, especially if it the sloping roof supported on the walls directly. Another example you will see, you can physically see, it's literally tilting out at the joint between two walls. And thankfully it has not fallen, but would have, you can imagine if it would have fallen, what kind of damage it would have caused. External cladding. So you could have some glass panels coming out and falling, or you could have this entire system, being crippled. You can see the transoms and mullions, completely given away. There is no strength left. They are like, small wooden sticks, start trying to stand somehow. And in this case, all the glass panels. So now you see structure is more or less intact. You can't find much wrong with the structure, but the glass has come out completely. And if there was somebody standing below, it would have, he would have got injured, that person. other NACs, now they may not cause a direct human life loss, right? But as I mentioned, they can cause a disruption in terms of functioning post earthquake or even sometimes during earthquake. Now the tank on the left hand side, you can see completely come out of the support. Now you can see there is a proper supporting structure created. The tank has its own base created out of plates and everything. It still comes out because the anchors have not been adequately put, or they have not been adequately designed for perhaps. On the right hand side, what you can see is a battery storage, kind of unit, which I mentioned for the uninterrupted power supply, UPS, right? So it was stored on a rack, right? But that rack was not designed to sustain that load properly during earthquake. So as I mentioned, it is not sufficient to store it properly, but it is sufficient to secure it properly. And we'll see how to do that in a very simple manner during some later phases. So it has completely come out. Now to restore the entire system, electrical system, I don't know what time it will cost them and what cost it will incur. Now these are some of the typical photos. So on the left hand side, you can see the ODUs stored on terrace perhaps, completely toppled, disjointed completely. So it's going to be complete replacement more or less. The figure in the center is again similar to sort of a mainframe perhaps, or some hardware of a office, which was storing something, and it has completely come out. Apart from that, the cupboards and the smaller stuff, which have files and all, that has fallen. On the right hand side figure, you can see the glass is partially damaged on the left hand side. The wall on the right hand side has cracks and everything, and false ceiling, the lighting from top has completely, come down. Then on the left hand side, you can see the auditorium perhaps, or a small, club kind of a thing, or a badminton court. I don't know exactly what it was, but entire false ceiling has come down. And some of the lights you can still hanging from top, but the false ceiling has completely given away. And so it will be if any event was going over there and if people were inside, or if it's a community hall and people come there for relief, say rescue, then they themselves would get injured. Now, the figure in the center, I don't need to speak much. It's the complete system has come down from the false ceiling. The entire piping HVAC system has come down. Figure on the right hand side is from a small airport in Argentina, wherein you can see not just the false ceiling, but even the cables, other stuff, has come down. You can see the seats have not been damaged. So you can see that whatever is connected securely to the floor is not damaged, but whatever was not connected securely. An airport, you can again imagine how important that would be for many activities, not just during earthquake, but post earthquake. A typical example of all shambles. So HVAC, electrical, all false ceiling, even the firefighting system. You can see the pipe has come out and bent, on different places on the left hand side figure. So to restore this place will be next to impossible. It's like doing everything from scratch, right? So that's the impact that we have. So if you don't have your non-structural elements supported properly, you will pay in case of earthquake, and those things will be out of your hand. Now this photo is a famous, I don't know how many of you have seen the Lord of the Rings movie, the trio, but there was a character Gandalf, and he has an eagle, and the New Zealand airport, one of the New Zealand airports had this eagle mounted inside, hanging from roof as an attraction, kind of an attraction for launch of the movie, during the launch of the movie, and completely fell down. And again, I don't know. I mean, if there were people inside it, below it, I don't know what kind of damage it caused. It also damages reputation. So if your building is of importance and such things happen, then it causes kind of a reputation loss also. So that's something that we need to consider as professionals, what it means to client, whatever we are trying to do. So there is a new code called IS 16700 for high-rise structures. and it characterizes non-structural elements into three main categories. So one is called acceleration sensitive NSEs. So these we will see a detailed classification later. So these basically arise, they become sensitive to the change in the movement. So if sudden stop, start, those kind of things, and not necessarily by how much it has moved, right? So these are acceleration sensitive. Then something called deflection sensitive, wherein the value of the movement, how much it has moved, is of importance, and now not how, right? So these are called deflection sensitive NSEs. And there are some which sort are sensitive to both. So they might have damage due to deflection or acceleration or both, right? Now these are technical definitions. So let's look at some simple classifications, right? So these are your consumer goods, right? Your fridges, washing machine, all kind of loose equipment, loose furniture, that comes under acceleration related things. Force is acceleration basically, right? Then typical architectural finishes, so doors and windows, large panels of glass or other partitions. So they are sensitive to both acceleration as well as deflection. False ceiling, primarily it is suspended system, then it is dependent on both. But if it is in patches, like you have small patches of false ceiling connected to roof at local pulses, then primary concern will be acceleration and not displacement. Then partitions, now they are again depending on both, right? Then other things like chimneys or stacks coming out of terrace, parapets, small tanks that may be mounted, all of these again acceleration. So the vibrations itself might become a problem because building undergoes to and fro from one end to another, that becomes a problem. All systems of facade which are either directly supported on structure or they have their own structure, they are sensitive to both force and displacement. Because if the force is not strong enough, but if deflection is large enough, then they might fall out, that kind of thing. So imagine a building moving towards right, so when there is no earthquake, it is standing perfectly vertical. And during earthquake, the differential deflection between the two immediate floors. So let's say at floor number 40, your deflection is say 200 millimeters. And at floor number 41, it is 216 millimeters. So differential is 16 millimeters, and that differential may got the toppling effect on that structural element, whatever is the element. So those things, so they are again dependent on both. Most of the services, right, how they are, because they're the way they are secured, right, they will be subjected to both force and displacement, and they are dependent. But relatively flexible things like pipes, wires, gas pipelines, those have their own elasticity to some extent. Ducts, right? So they are not susceptible to force as much, but are susceptible to more of deflection, right? But if it comes to equipment, boilers, HVAC equipment, all of them, they are supported physically to structure, on structure. They are connected to structure strongly. So displacement is not a worry of them. Force is a worry of them. So it's primarily dependent on how they are, secured or mounted. Now let us look at why it might be important to look at NSEs. Okay, so what if I have to redo partition? What's a big deal? If somebody can think of that. So of course, one is the capital cost. Now this is not an Indian comparison. I got it from the website, one of the websites. But it's basically for the developed countries like USA and Japan, and we can see the cost of NSE to the project as compared to structure is quite large. So from residentials, it is about 50 to 60%, to hospitals, where it is the most important functional building in case of a catastrophe like earthquake, it is as high as 90%. Right? So if your cost of NSE or capital investment or your even maintenance cost is so high on NSEs, then we better protect them properly, right? And that's the as simple aspect, why we should care about this and why we should not neglect the simple aspects of this is this, that they do cost a large. And unlike structure in a way where structure is designed to withstand earthquake, right? Because it is the primary system, of the building where everything is supported. So it has to be designed. The cost is imperative over there. But let's look at a tank, for example, which holds water, and it's a fabricated tank. Now the tank itself may be designed for whatever the earthquake forces. But if the connection between tank and structure is not designed to correspond to that, then there is a problem, right? It's not the design of the NAC, it's the secured way of putting it, with the structure. That is the important part. And if you look at the trend in India, now if you look at the growth in terms of a cost of NAC in a project as a percentage, right? Now I'll give a simple example. Why is this such a strong change, right? So if you look at even government offices, say offices in 60s and 70s, which you may be able to see in some of the movies, we will have simple wooden furniture, simple chairs, a ceiling fan, some cabinets for keeping files, and that's the end of it. Even government offices today will have a proper AC, false ceiling, maybe a glazing. If you look at buildings in BKC, which are most of the nationalized banks, they're as swanky as any other multinational, right? So their cost on the infrastructure is much higher today than what it was maybe 20 years, 30 years ago. And that is not structural cost, because structural cost is proportional. What was costing X earlier may be costing 10X today. It has not gone primarily up on the account of choice. It is primarily gone out because of the cost of material itself. But the design perhaps has remained more or less within the same margin in the last 25 years. But NACs, the investment on NACs has gone up. So which has resulted in a approach, the way we approach these things. So if you look at structural, ACG structural elements, the old code, when I say current, it was basically before the new code came into being about 2 years ago. So in a low intensity earthquake, a structure is okay to have, structure will have no damage. Okay. In a moderate earthquake, it may have minor damage, and in an extreme condition, severe earthquake, the condition was expected that it should be no collapse, right? And now there are two parts to it. One is behavior, other is critical and lifeline kind of structures, right? So there was no distinction earlier. Now there is a clear-cut distinction. And you can see even in severe earthquake, a structure which is critical and lifeline should have only minor damages. And if you look at the NACs in the current code, there was hardly any focus on that. Nobody talked about them in a breadth or a manner the way we talk about structures today. Excuse me. But if you look at even in a moderate earthquake, it was okay that some of them are getting damaged, and none of them were considered critical and lifeline. Now you have got practically everything in a no damage condition, and in severe earthquake, some of them could have some damage but not permanent. So more or less, they are not looking at any replacement cost for NECs for most buildings. That is the approach I'm saying. I'm not saying that this is a physical condition, but codes have become much more worried about or much more specific about NECs in this manner. So how are the design procedures? So design procedure is a bit complicated and technical, so I'm not going into details of that, but just three main important points I'll make. So there is an importance factor which we discussed in structure also. I think Sangeeta covered it in a bit, right? You have structures of very high importance, like hospitals, railway stations, communication buildings. Those have an importance factor of 1.5. And most other structures will have 1.2 or 1, lesser than that. If you look at NACs, the least importance factor is 2, right? And the highest is 2.5. So you can imagine that in their own space, NACs are given more importance compared to structure, because if the structure survives, the NSE must survive. That is the thought. So look at it in a reverse manner, right? If structure does not survive, nothing survives. So it's okay. It's not. When I'm saying it's okay, in the sense I'm saying you can't do much about it. That's what I'm trying to say. But if structure survives and NSE don't survive, it is not okay now. You need to have NSEs which are functional after the earthquake, and that's the importance given to it. As I mentioned, acceleration sensitive NSEs have to be designed for a certain force. I got this figure just to tell you that the importance to the NSE is as same as structure. The Z here is seismic zone factor, same as for structure. Importance factor we mentioned already, it is higher than the structure. Component response reduction modifying factor. So this is purely kind of a you can say a lowering of a design value if you want in a thing, and then there is an amplification factor also required. So NSE is given importance depending on how it is sensitive to acceleration, and same thing for deflection, wherein if structure deflects by x, the NSE is supposed to withstand deflection of 1.2x. 20% higher deflection should be sustained by the NSE. So there is a safety margin that they are trying to building. So already structures have a safety margin of deflection, I think, which Sangeeta mentioned, 0.4% or h by 250, and the NSEs have a higher safety margin than that. Now this is an international study, not in Indian code, but just to give you an example. So these are the drift limits for various components that are suggested. Now this will, if not today, tomorrow it will be in the codes. And so your contractors who are putting up these NSEs for you, they need to be now technically aware, of how to go do things. You cannot just pick up some material and fix somewhere and can be called a contractor. So contractors will have to be technically knowledgeable, and then they can be so they should be then employed for a project based on how they work and what kind of technical knowledge they have in terms of installation. So it is not just that you buy equipment and somebody puts it up for you. You have to know how to install it properly. Now, why these things fall off, right? Or what happens? Why they get damaged? So on the top ABC, you can see that there is some equipment. During the motion, it sort of topples both ways, left to right, right to left, and which may cause failure. And it also slides left to right, depending on how tall. So if the equipment is not tall, it is short in size, it may slide. If it is tall, it may not slide as much, but topple or swing laterally and then topple. So these are main causes of failure during the earthquake motion. And you can see the red arrow below the black line. Basically, black line represents the floor, and red arrows point both ways, which indicates that during earthquake, actually building vibrates in both directions, and which we saw a video that day, right? How the building actually vibrates. So what is the recommended approach? So if you have a pump, for example, and technically speaking, by its own weight, it can be easily supported because it will compress, it will push things down. But in case of earthquake, there is a possibility of toppling action. So you need to have anchors on both sides of the equipment, or in short, 4 minimum anchors. So all 4 directions are secured from toppling. Another is deflection sensitive, right? So let's say this is a sewage pipe, coming from top, or a rainwater pipe coming from top. If it is bent along with the building the way it is indicated, of course it is highly exaggerated figure, but if it is bent like this, then obviously at some point it may snap because it is not supported properly or not designed to carry this bend, or it may not function properly in carrying the whatever it is. So if this pipe is supported but is allowed to sort of remain vertical despite the movement, right? So you basically create holes in the floor of certain size, so that even if the building goes to the left or to the right, the pipe still remains vertical. You see the understanding in this, that pipe should not move with the building. Pipe should remain vertical during the earthquake, which still should get supported, but should not move. So as a simple thing like this will, you know, spare the damage that it would have caused. So let's see some specific examples of this. How do we support NSs? So if you have something that is tall and it may fall off, like the way you can see on the figure on the left hand side, that yellow box trying to topple down, as simple as, you know, clamping it from top, will support it. Or if you don't have wall sufficiently close to clamping it, you can clamp it securely on 4 sides in the base, you know, at and all faces. So in the figure in the B, you can see clamping at base, you know, on all 4 sides, which will secure the toppling action. So if you have a facade or glass, you know, on the surface, which is, so all of us know glass cannot deform once it is laid to a shape, right? If you leave gap between the two next panels sufficient enough so that glass will absorb that, the glass panel as a whole can absorb that movement, then it will prevent the, you know, panel from cracking or, you know, getting damaged or falling it out. Let's look at a simple connection like in a gas supply line to a building through, I know, either a overhead or something which is underground, both, it doesn't matter. If you, the final connection, if it is kept flexible, right, then even if the building vibrates, that flexible connection, that green thing that you see in the in between, will help it secured, you know, in the plan in a way, and will not allow it to either break also or to, you know, get compressed also. Same thing with electrical cable. If you have sufficient play in the sag that electrical cable naturally has, then you will not have to worry about either getting pulled out due to movement on the other side. You can see that the pole is trying to bend away from the building and the cable is trying to straighten, but there is a sufficient slack here or slack here, which will prevent it from coming out. Or the pipe example we just saw, you know, if you create slots in the structure to keep the pipe secured in a vertical position, then you don't have to worry about it. Now these slots are exaggerated, so this figure is just for understanding. Your deflections will not be so high compared to a floor where you will need such a large slot, but you'll have to do something about this. Or you know, partition walls we talked about, whether it's a brick partition or some other partition. So here are some examples from a nice guideline book in America. It's based on American code, but it's an example we can use everywhere. So what they are saying typically is to secure not only at the base, but also at the top. So you secure at base slab also and top slab also by some means to arrest the lateral movement for the wall. And then there are of course guidelines for that, you know, at what spacing these angles should be, what should be type of anchors and all of this. If you look at pipes which are suspended, you know, then typically you will find a single hanger or a hook carrying the pipe load. So that hook is acting like a pendulum. So it will simply swing when the earthquake comes. There is no support to it. It will hold the vertical load, but it cannot support any lateral load. Instead of that, at sufficient intervals, if you add bracings, one is along the length of the pipe and other is across the length, and they may not be at every location. You can design them at, you know, different intervals. Then the pipe is secured in both directions. So these angle braces help the pipe remain in position irrespective of lateral movement. Otherwise, pipe will move like a swing, you know, from left to right, this kind of thing. For false ceiling, instead of having only a vertical suspender from the ceiling, you can have wire braces in 4 or 2 directions or alternate directions depending on how you want to place them, which will hold the pipe in vertical position even during the lateral movement. Otherwise, the pipe will simply swing from the slab and that's why the panels come out during the earthquake, from the fault zone. And in a similar concept, you can support the ducts, HVAC ducts also. So this presentation was not deeply technical, very short, but I do believe it was quite useful. I wanted to keep it simple. Now, if you want to go into more technical, I'm okay with question answers.
Yes, thank you, sir. Any questions from the students, guys? Guys, any questions? Uh, okay, so, sir, just a small request. If you can, last time I told you about this. Is there any structural requirement for the logistical part? For example, fixing of crane and fixing of equipments while construction. So, do we need to consider those aspects while
Right.
design?
Yeah. So cranes are typically tower cranes or other cranes. They are used during construction. So as a result, structure itself is not fully complete, right? So in this case, typically what we do, there is an interaction that happens between us and the person who is putting the crane. Okay. And they give us the kind of support or the forces they might incur during the operation, and then we together decide how to connect it. Typically what we do is we use either the main shear course or the slab for the crane, because slab is very strong in terms of offering a horizontal support to the crane, because it is very thick comparatively and it covers the entire periphery of the building. So as a result, it generally very strong. And what happens is, so for example, if these cranes, you have a 50-story building, then initially they don't erect the full 50-story tower crane. They will erect only up to certain height, bring the building up to certain level, and then they will increase the height of the crane from that point. So they will require support depending on where we are at the stage of construction. So that's basically a mutual discussion, and we need to know what supports they require and what kind of forces they are expecting, and we need to design for that. But it's a special connection that we need to design. It is not something run of the mill.
Okay, okay. So I think this is applicable for my one technology as well.
My one tech is slightly different. So in my one, what happens is all those wall panels are shuttering panels, right? Ultimately, so they are in small parts. They are not single piece. So even if my wall is 6 meters, I might have 2 or 3 panels of my one. So they are shifted in pieces on the next floor, right? So that's not a major concern. Major concern is the tower cranes that are used, to carry the steel girders, which are very heavy. Sometimes a steel column may weigh as high as 4 tons in a single floor. That's the thing, 3 to 4 tons. So that's a very heavy load. The shuttering panels, they are comparatively lightweight.
Okay, okay. One more question I've received. Do we need to consider? I mean, what do you suggest if we provide swimming pool or plunge pool kind of thing in the multiple levels? Is it feasible? Is it suggested, or we should avoid it?
It is, yeah. Generally, I mean, if you look at the new code, it simply says avoid it. Okay, and there are two reasons. One is swimming pool. Even if you say a simple 25-meter long, maybe 4-meter wide, and a 2-meter, 1.5-meter deep water, not even 1.5, 2 meters, 1.5 or 1.2 meters deep water, it will be still 100, 120 cubic meters of water, right? that itself becomes straight away 100 tons, right, of load at a small location of the building. That's very, very huge. Other thing is during earthquakes, the water actually sloshes out of the building, out to the pool. It will cause a sloshing effect, if you can understand, like a wave. Small waves are created inside the water, and that causes the local damage to the whatever the parapet walls. If you have an infinity pool kind of a concept, then the support below, that causes damage. That so in general they should be avoided. If you, of course, everything has a price. If you take due care, if you take all the design requirements into consideration and do sufficiently strong structure for that, it is still possible. But I mean, clients have to be willing to pay for that price.
Right. So maybe for hotel projects, hospitality projects, we can consider that.
Right.
And what about a landscape?
Okay. So again, landscape is so there are various right today. Earlier, it was only soil that you could use for creating a landscape. Nothing much alternative materials. But nowadays we have lot of material. You have a pre-mixed soil which is very lightweight. You have coco pit, other methods, artificial soil. Those will give you the same effect of a garden, but will not be weighing so heavy. Other thing they allow, soil retains water, right? If it's a normal soil. If you have artificial soil, it will not retain water. It will drain it out. So the weight will come down. And those are the things that are generally recommended. And very often, especially high-rise buildings, high-rise committee does not approve large gardens or large soil-filled spaces, in a tall building. They will ask you to use either potted plants or, the systems you have vertical green walls where it's minimal soil. It's more of drip irrigation, continuous irrigation system. Those kind of things they suggest to go for.
Okay.
But definitely not grass and trees, on a building.
Right.
Like I will like to mention Antilia, which we handled. They had gardens at 3 levels, just above the lower block where the podium completes. You have those inclined columns coming out, right? Everybody has seen Antilia.
Right.
So at those levels there are gardens, and we had a really tough time accommodating the weight of those.
Right.
But because it was Ambani who was willing to pay for it, it could be managed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Great talking to you. And
thank you. And on this non-structural elements, let me mention one thing, that it is relatively new thing in India, that we are talking about these things as a requirement. I mean, earlier, who cared, what kind of AC system you want? Structural engineer will complete the building and go. HVAC wala will come and he will put the ducts wherever he wants, however he wants. Don't talk to each other. But that is not the case today. There is a lot more interaction. There is a lot more understanding. And there is due importance given to these things. Still new field in India compared to the developed countries.
Right. And everything is now integrated with each other. So
yes. So if you look at the elevator, for example, I think you had a lecture from the elevator person, right?
Yes.
So in a tall building, they will give guidelines to us saying that we don't want vibrations between this range, or we don't want deflections beyond this range.
Exactly. Yeah.
Instead of we telling us to accommodate the deflections, they might lay down principles. See, ultimately, because if the building has to function, then elevators are as important, right? We cannot neglect that. And then we have to take care of the requirement as a guideline.
Right. Hello.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I hope it was useful. I had about 25-30 slides to show.
Yeah, sir. It was definitely useful, and graphically it is more catchy. So
correct. And I think you should remember this slide. I mean, why these are important today. As architects, you should be aware of cost ultimately, right? This is a very critical aspect. If my NSE is costing, I mean, structure is costing, let's say 20% of my project cost, but it supports everything else, right? So that's why it is important, but that's why others are also important or more important in that sense.
Right.
This is the important part. And with the kind of advancements, even in architecture for that matter, earlier having a nice lobby in an office building was okay. Rest of the things were okay, normal, not much of a
Secondary.
fancy thing.
Secondary.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But now every corner matters, those things. So that has gone up. All this importance to these small details. You have frescoes, you have murals created. One of the projects I had, there was a mural in the main lobby, office building. That mural itself was costing something like, I'm not sure, maybe 10-20 lakhs. Now imagine that coming down in an earthquake.
Yeah, even especially for hospitality projects like hotels, 5-star hotels and all, they have huge chandeliers and huge murals, cladding materials,
Exactly.
dry cladding. So a lot of dry cladding they use.
And this 10-20 lakhs I'm talking about is 10 years ago. So at least
Right.
thrice the price today, perhaps.
Exactly. Great, sir.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you for sharing.
And for any of you have any of the other queries, you can reach out to me. I think you have my personal mail ID, so you can be happy to answer them. Anything I can share
Sure, sir.
more on this.
Sure, sir. I'll coordinate with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot.